I used a 3/4 ounce John Skinner Blackfish Porgy jig throughout this video, and I'll have links to all of the gear in the video description. Oh, I've been waiting for this since I got that trolling motor. This is the start of the 2019 Blackfish season in New York, and what I'm excited about is this is the first time I'm going to get to use the spot lock feature on the trolling motor for Blackfish. I've used it for porgies, and I've used the motor for drift control for fluke, but this is different. You really need to get right on the structure for these fish. So, all right, I have a mark on my GPS, so I know where this rock is. But here it is. If you look on the left-hand side of the fish finder, there it is. I've hit the anchor button on my remote, and I'll show that remote in a second. And what it's going to do is it's just going to hold the boat right on that position. So at this point, the trolling motor is going to spin around, basically hit the brakes on that spot. Look, you even got some fish over the structure on the fish finder. There's the remote. Really simple, left, right, faster, slower, on, off. Autopilot, and most importantly for this trip, that anchor button. Just hit that anchor button, boom, the boat's going to be locked on there no matter wind, current, anything else is just going to hold it there. It's so convenient. So, all right, anchored up on the spot. Real excited to get started here. All right, I'm baiting up with some Asian crabs, and this is the very start of the trip. And what I want to show here in the beginning is that, it often takes at least a couple of minutes for a bite to get going, even if you've anchored on a good spot that holds fish. Hey, you know what? Sometimes you put down, and right away you're into Blackfish. More often, it takes a couple of minutes for them to get going, and that's going to be what's going to happen on this drop, and actually you're going to see something else that's going to be pretty common. This rod, actually, this is not going to be the one I'm going to use throughout the trip. I've got this other rod that I want to try, and I just accidentally grabbed this one. I was excited to get started here. So yeah, 3/4 ounce jig. You saw, I think it was like 28 feet of water. If you're not on top of the rock, and 15-pound test braid, so it gets down there and it holds, even though that there is some current. The 3/4 ounce jig is going to be just fine. All right, so I'm getting some little bumps and wraps, and that's so typical when you first set up on the spot, and you want to ignore all those little bumps and wait to feel the jig moving away with a fish. And this rod is that 6-foot tsunami slow pitch that I've used in previous seasons for blackfishing. It's a great blackfish rod. This will be the only drop that I make with it this trip, though. Okay, so not even a blackfish, it's a sea bass, and I can't tell you how many times a blackfish spot starts exactly like this. You put down the first fish or two of sea bass, and then after that you might not get any, but they're often the first things you catch when you set up. All right, now I'm going to switch over to this white rod. I've been dying to try this thing. It's a Tsunami Slim Wave, and to me the action looks really good on it, so I'm going to get that thing right in the water. I've got other Slim Waves, but I didn't have this one. I don't know if this is a newer model or not. I'll have a link to it in the description, but yeah, I'm going to end up loving it this trip. All right, so I'm flipping it a little bit up current here. I do have current, so if I toss it up current a little bit, by the time it gets to the bottom, it's pretty much straight down, which is where I want it. Beautiful rod. Nice. That's a beauty. Colors. It's always nice to see that first one come aboard. You'll see on that fish, or you'll see it on other fish, that golden color. I don't know. When I fished farther up west in the Sound, and it was really only about 25 miles west of here. I didn't used to see that color. I don't know why that is, but quite a few of the fish have that coloring. Yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but kind of nice looking fish. So I'm fishing Long Island Sound. The limit is 3 at 16 inches. I will keep a couple this trip for dinner. Those are keeper size, but if I need to measure it that closely, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm quite confident I'll be able to get ones that are decent size, and probably I'll just keep 2. So I doubt that one ever hit the bottom. It didn't feel like it, and that's kind of important. When you drop down, you really want to get contact with your line as soon as the jig hits the bottom, because a lot of times, once you've got these fish going, it is, basically you drop down and they're on it immediately. So you want to be ready for that. So these Asian crabs, it's an invasive species. They didn't used to be around. If you Google it, it's pretty interesting. It's not even that they've been in this country that long, but they've spread rapidly, and they are underneath rocks in many areas, and that's pretty much how you get them. You can also get them in bait and tackle stores. They make excellent blackfish baits. I usually put 2 on the hook. If they're really small, I might put 3 on there, but the fish love them. So you're going to see I'm going to miss a couple here. And nice thing about jigging is whether the bait's still on your jig, because the jig is so light that the addition of the crab makes a big difference. So when I lift here, I can tell whether the crab is still on there or not, like right there. But you can feel that extra weight is there. If you were fishing 4 or 5 ounces of lead, you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference if the crab was still on. But yeah, that's a nice advantage over jigging. You know if your bait's still on there or not. All right, so I caught a bunch of keepers, and then I started getting some shorts. I decided to make a move, and so here we go. Here's another big bulge on the fish finder. You can see it coming up, and if you watch the trolling motor, you're going to see it just turn around and pretty much, like I said, hit the brakes. There it goes. It's kind of spinning around. I've hit the anchor button, so it's going to just, lock me in on that spot. And one thing I've noticed in using the trolling motor for this is that since it's so easy to anchor over a new spot, you don't hesitate to do that. So I'm going to end up hitting like 4 rocks on this trip, and normally I wouldn't do that because it's a pain to anchor, and sometimes you don't get it the first time. And then when you do anchor, it seems like, I don't know, when I'm using a conventional anchor, I'm like never exactly where I want to be, and if I am, then I'm afraid to move. With the trolling motor, just pushing a button, no, it's not the case. Didn't hesitate to move, and it's going to pay off here. Now, something I did notice on this trip was that the bigger fish were typically earlier on when I first got onto a spot. Like this one came pretty much right away, but the better fish came earlier on, and then it would kind of whittle down to shorts, and which is kind of weird. I mean, I'm not keeping all those fish, but pretty much once you catch them, you're not going to catch them a second time. So when it would whittle down to shorts, I'd just go make a move. So one thing I noticed about anchoring with the trolling motor that you kind of have to be careful about is because you could get right on top of the rock, you end up anchoring right on top of the rock. So if you're in 28 feet of water and you drop your jig down and you realize that there's no way it got all the way to the bottom before it stopped, well, you know what, you might have dropped the jig right on top of the rock, or you caught it on the side of the rock, and that's not where you want it. You want it on the bottom next to the rock. So a couple times on this trip, I did that, and I had to just disengage the anchor for a second, then re-engage just to get a little bit down current or get right on the edge of the rock as opposed to being right on top of it. Usually it's not as much of a problem anchoring with conventional anchor, for me at least, because I'm happy just to get near it. But yeah, with this you can plant yourself right on top of it, and you really do want to be fishing right along the edges. And the trolling motor has a jog feature. You can jog 5 feet either direction by hitting a button. So that's a good way to make sure you're just slightly off the rock and near its edge as opposed to on top. Oh, there's a pretty decent sized sea bass. You know what? I've got enough fish for dinner, so I'm going to let this guy go. I know they're excellent eating. So I had a bunch of dead crabs in the bucket. So what I've been doing on this trip is I've been putting on like one dead one, one live one throughout most of the trip. And yeah, as you can see, it's working just fine. As for the jig color, I prefer that orange. First of all, if you cut open a green crab, it's that color orange on the inside. The other thing is, and it came from fluke fishing when I did underwater video, and I looked at video shot 85 feet down, that orange was like the only color that was still the same color as it was on the surface. It was very bright. It really stood out. And I think with the blackfish, if you can stand out, get their attention, I've taken underwater video of blackfish before. They are really very curious creatures. So if you can get their attention, they're going to come over and check you out. And certainly if there's a piece of crab on that orange thing, yep, well, this is going to be the result. All right, I've got side scan on this, and I'm going to use that the next trip. But you know, I'm still learning this stuff. So what I wanted to do was see the rock that I just fished. I wanted to see what it looked like on side scan. So I'm going alongside of it, and it's on the inside of me. So on the left is the side scan screen, and on the left part of that, you could, there it is. So I'm pointing at that rock, pointing at the mark. That was the rock. And apparently they throw this, it's like a sonar shadow that it throws. It looks like a shadow on the unit, and the longer the shadow, the higher the structure is. So, yep, next trip you're going to get to see that in use. And but for now, I'm just having fun with the spot lock and catching the first blackfish of the season. All right, I've made a move to the third rock of this trip, and this is my first drop on this, and this will be the longest that I go on this trip, waiting for a decent bite or a blackfish. So I want to leave this on here. I mean, it's only like a couple of minutes at most. But again, it shows that when you first get on the rock, you got to give it time. I guess the fish, they sense the commotion of the other fish, and certainly the crabs going into the water. They pick up on that scent, which is it's weird for me because I dive and you see all the blackfish around the rock. So if I'm near the rock, you'd think, the blackfish are there. So it's kind of odd to me that it sometimes will take time for them to get going, but nevertheless, that's the case, and that's what I'm doing right now. In fact, I keep looking over at the screen because I've gone like, I don't know, there's this minute and a half, and I don't have any decent bites, so I keep looking at the screen going, am I sure I'm on the rock? Yeah, I'm right there. And the fish I've been showing on video are the keepers, and I would say on this trip I had more shorts than keepers. Not a lot more shorts. And sometimes you go out and you really have to cull through smaller fish to get some better ones. That wasn't the case on this trip. They were pretty good percentage of legal size, which again is 16 inches in New York. You'll notice my fish finder is turned off there. Once I'm sure I'm on the spot, then I'll turn it off. I think it certainly doesn't hurt to turn it off. I always wonder about the sonar hitting the bottom, whether that could scatter the fish. It really doesn't seem like it does. I kind of had that impression with porgies that it might do that, but certainly it doesn't seem to hurt. But hey, it won't hurt to turn it off, and it will save battery. Otherwise, I'm sitting there just burning battery. So, yep, I turn it off. All right, I'm going to leave you with one more nice one. Yeah, you know, I got to fish on a boat last year that had a trolling motor anchoring for blackfish, and boy, I can tell you after using one on my own boat, yeah, it will spoil you. It's just so convenient. I really like being able to go to other rocks and move around without having to go through the extra work of anchoring. And yeah, so this turned out to be a lot of fun, and nothing really huge came up, but it's early in the season. They'll come. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you like these videos, please subscribe.